Last year, Megadeth had a hit with Symphony of Destruction, and that's now been remixed by Nine Inch Nails' Trent Reznor, and here it is.
You take a mortal man and put him in control. Watch him become a god. Watch people's heads roll. Acting like a robot. Its metal brain corrodes. You try to take us both before the head explodes. The earth starts to rumble. Well, powers fall. Roaring for the heavens. A peaceful man stands tall.
Every time he'd hit it, it would fall over and we'd have to stop.
Nothing came of that initial encounter, but Ulrich did later get an offer to do a track for a metal compilation album. He had no band, but he remembered his meeting with James Hetfield.
Lars had called me back, got a hold of me and said he knew this guy, Brian Slagle, who was putting together this compilation album called Metal Massacre.
Me and James, you know, wrote this song together called Hit the Lights. The review in some of the magazines in Europe said this was the worst sounding song the guy had ever, like, heard. You know, it was the worst recording that this guy had ever heard on an album.
We tried to recruit other guitar players. Our bass player, Ron, who I was living with, was in the band for quite a while. We tried all kinds of different guys, local, you know, from beach bums to Hollywood rockers.
One day, I'm sitting in my house and the phone rings, and this guy just gets on the phone and says, "Hey, I got all this equipment and blah, blah, blah," just motor mouthing off, and I got my own photographer, and I got my own driver, and I'm like going, huh? And it turned out this was this guy named Dave Mustaine.
What Metallica actually did was you watched four guys get together, these mad nuclear physicists or whatever, and we kind of spilled some chemicals into a drum, and boom, there you go. Speed metal defined.
With its initial lineup complete, Metallica started clubbing around LA in March of 1982, pounding out covers by such underground British metal bands as Sweet Savage and Blitzkrieg. Then the band whipped up 7 original songs for a demo tape to circulate, the now near legendary No Life Till Leather.
I would send like 5 tapes out, and those 5 guys would, you know, copy them and send them to, you know, 5 other guys, and those 5, you know, it would just spread like wildfire. And within like a couple of months, like the whole underground around the country and also in Europe just knew about Metallica.
Metallica's first lineup seemed stable, but something was missing, and Ulrich and Hetfield realized what it was when they caught a band called Trauma at the Whiskey in Los Angeles one night and were knocked out by the group's bassist, Cliff Burton.
He just had this stage presence and this visual thing about him that was just incredible.
We couldn't tell what he was playing, but and we looked a little closer, and it was the bass guitar, and he had these wild noises coming out of it, and you know, his head wouldn't stop. It was on a swivel, you know. We pretty much knew he was our kind of guy.
After 3 months of wooing and the band's agreement to move up to San Francisco, Cliff Burton agreed to become Metallica's new bassist. Soon after, the group got a phone call from New York from a man named John Zazula, or Johnny Z. He'd heard their tape, and he wanted them to relocate to the East Coast and record for a new label he was starting called Megaforce.
We hopped in this U-Haul with all the gear. We were sleeping in the back on the way, drove straight there. We kind of found out on the road how Dave was, which was, he had a few drinks and got a little out of control, you know, towards our friends and us, which was not gonna work. We were, you know, real into the family kind of vibe, and if it wasn't, you know, we didn't need anything screwing it up. So the first thing when we met Johnny Z was, "Hi, we're here. We want to get rid of our guitar player."
My feelings were hurt, and, you know, I still think of them all the time. It's been kind of hard for me getting to the point where all that, because, you know, there was a lot of jealousy and a lot of me dealing with what was going on in my head, watching these guys achieve this stellar position in the industry that I'm still working in.
The decision to dump Dave Mustaine from the Metallica lineup immediately created a major problem, finding a wildly talented replacement. Fortunately, the band was already aware of another San Francisco Bay Area band, and its remarkable guitarist, Kirk Hammett.
I was in the band almost instantly, and a week later we were gigging all over the place and living this this lifestyle.
We had to live in this, it's called the Music Building. It was in Jamaica, Queens. Other bands would come in and rehearse there and go home, you know, and sleep in a nice little bed. And you weren't even supposed to, you know, be there or whatever. But we knew all the people there. We were sleeping on, you know, the corners and the, you know, packing material, how our amps got there, you know.
The band in the next room over was Anthrax. And they felt sorry for us. So they gave us a toaster oven and a refrigerator.
We have a debut album out on Megaforce Records. It's called Kill 'Em All. We're glad to kill all you tonight.
That whole thing that happens to you when you, for the first time, stand there and like actually like hold your own album, you know, and Metallica, and see your picture and songs that you've been playing for a couple of years. And I mean, that was a very heavy thing.
After their Kill 'Em All for One tour, the band considered hiring Armored Saint singer John Bush to be Metallica's frontman, freeing James Hetfield to concentrate on his guitar playing. Bush declined, however, and so Metallica pressed on, starting work on the album that would elevate the band to a new creative level, Ride the Lightning.
I think it showed all our fans and so on that we were not the kind of band that I think was going to be in the pile of predictable bands, and that hopefully we set the tone for the rest of the 80s.
Fancy, you know, it's just us doing what we do. Let's keep it that way.
Bring the music more across instead of the look. Not try and hide anything.
In March of 1985, with virtually no radio airplay, Metallica's Ride the Lightning album peaked at number 100 on the Billboard chart, an astonishing accomplishment given the lack of industry support. Encouraged and more determined than ever, the band parted ways with Johnny Z and his Megaforce label, hired new management, and signed with a major U.S. company, Elektra Records. Metallica spent the second half of the year in Denmark recording a third album called Master of Puppets.
At that time, we were just getting out of that mode of, you know, listening to nothing but, you know, the most extreme music there was.
Tried to create a little more mood swings into things, incorporate more acoustic work to, you know, make the heavier stuff and heavier, you know, dynamics and things like that. We started learning harmonies, which Cliff was really good at. He took music theory. He was basically teaching, at least myself, a lot about harmonies and how, you know, how they intertwine, how they work together.
You all know Cliff Burton over here?
When we heard we got the Aussie tour, it was like, ooh, you know, here we are, this is it. Things are going real well. 55 minutes, you know, all our stage set up. It's real cool. We'd get up and at sound check, we'd be doing, you know, old Black Sabbath songs, and, you know, maybe tomorrow he'll get up and sing with us or something, you know.
Things were rolling along. I mean, Master of Puppets went like top 30 album, and the Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning like re-entered Billboard charts, and we had like all 3 albums on at the same time, and there was a lot of things going on.
The Ozzy Osbourne tour was a career peak for Metallica, and when the band decided to take a break from it to play some headlining dates in Europe, the members weren't expecting to suddenly go crashing down to rock bottom. But on September 26, 1986, tragedy struck.
I couldn't sleep on the bus in this top bunk. It was too drafty. My throat, you know, was getting screwed up, so I'd always go sleep in the back lounge.
We couldn't get it all together. We were arguing with each other and saying, well, you know, I want your bunk, well, I want your bunk, blah, blah, blah. I've never told anyone this, by the way. But our manager said, well, why don't we just draw cards? We said, sure. So we shuffled the cards, said highest card gets first choice of bunks. So, you know, I reach for a card, and I pick 2 of hearts. Cliff reaches for a card, he gets ace of spades. You know, James gets a card, Lars gets a card. So Cliff has first choice of bunks. So he says, I want your bunk, Kirk. I go, fine, you know. So he gets my bunk. I end up with a bunk in the front of the bus, which was like not as good. And that night the accident happened, and it was a horrible thing because, you know, Cliff was in my former bunk. What happened that night was that the driver supposedly hit a patch of ice, and the bus skidded. It shattered the windows, and Cliff got thrown out of the bus, and the bus landed on top of him. And when it actually happened, I got thrown out of my bunk and knocked unconscious for like 3 or 4 seconds. And when I came to, I heard everyone screaming, but I didn't hear Cliff. And I instantly knew something was wrong because I didn't hear him. And I got out of the top of the bus, because there's an emergency hatch at the very top of the bus. And I turned around, and there was Cliff. And I just said, oh my God. And I walked away, and I was in absolute shock. And I was delirious. I was in shock. I was hysterical. Everyone was screaming and crying.
It was too unreal to just deal with. It was like, you know, this doctor came into the room that I was in the hospital and told me that our bass player had died, and it was just too unreal.
Just I remember our tour manager at the time, Bobby Schneider, said, you know, after everyone was kind of taken care of there, he said, you know, let's get the band and go to the hotel. And he said, you know, when he said band, it was like, it's not really a band right now. And we couldn't really grasp it for a while.
We had to sit down and actually face this. You know, what were we going to do? We realized that the last thing that Cliff would obviously want us to do, and we couldn't stop now. You know, Metallica had always been about going against whatever would come our way and just sort of carrying on.
We weren't really looking for a Cliff Part 2. You know, someone who could like solo a lot and someone who was really eccentric like he was in his own way.
They'd come in with their bass and they'd plug in and start fiddling around, and you knew right away. It's like, ugh. We had the little signal, you know, that we'd, you know, it was like, see ya. You know, you could tell, you know, he started going, bap, 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 you know, doing this funky stuff. It's like, wait a minute, you know, next.
One day, this kid named Jason Newsted just walked in, and it was pretty obvious that there was something about him that was pretty different.
It wasn't just about playing bass. There's so much more to it, and those guys knew it, and I knew it.
Deciding immediately that the band had to go on, the surviving members of Metallica set their sights on a new bassist, Jason Newsted, from a band called Flotsam and Jetsam. They chose their local hangout, Tommy's Joint, to tell him the good news.
I guess that was part of the test, too, is to see if I could kind of hang and have, you know, beers and keep myself together.
So me, James, and Kirk kind of ended up meeting in the bathroom up here, and we were standing there relieving ourselves and basically looked at each other and said, is that the guy? And we just kind of all just, you know, nodded and said, yeah, that's him. We came back, sat down around this very table.
Lars said, so do you want a job? When I said, yeah, and I just got a little nutty and started screaming a little bit, you know.
I just basically looked at him and I said, hey, man, want a job? And this is what he did. Woo-hoo! Scared everybody out of the establishment.
and then we thought twice about this.
I knew there was going to be tests, and I knew that people were going to be messing with me here, messing with me there, trying to figure out if I was going to be the right guy for the job. And that's certainly what happened. And it came from all ends, you know. It came from crew guys and friends and family and whatever. But stuck it out, and here we are 6 years later.
11 days after Jason Newsted officially became Metallica's new bassist, the band embarked on its first tour of Japan. Next came an EP of cover tunes, Garage Days Revisited, and then the group started work on its next album, And Justice for All, a collection of very extended tracks that would eventually become Metallica's first top 10 hit and spawn its first music video.
It is impossible for a decelebrated individual to experience pain, pleasure, memory, dreams, or thought of any kind. This young man will be as unfeeling, as unthinking as the dead until the day he joins them.
We really realized that you could use the medium of video to do your, you know, a creative thing just as much as records or anything else. And right then I knew that we definitely entered into the video age just like everybody else had 10 years before us. I remember, like, now you're supposed to put makeup on, and James, like, ran in the other direction and stuff like that. It was, like, hilarious.
And Justice for All was nominated for a Grammy Award, and Metallica itself became the first metal band to play at the awards show. Unfortunately, in a now notorious incident, the group lost the Best Metal Band award to Jethro Tull, of all acts. The band soldiered on, though, winding up a tour, taking a 9-month break, and then starting work on a collection of surprisingly shorter songs produced by hard rock veteran Bob Rock that would become the biggest Metallica album to date.
We're taking those 10-minute mini epics and that whole progressive side just about as far as it could go.
Concentrated more on just one riff through the whole song, which was just as, just as challenging instead of trying to jam 100 riffs into one song.
The first song that we wrote